and with my brothers and sisters at my side. There is no fight we fear.
So with the full reveal of Ghost Recon Breakpoint came a hell of a lot of details on how the gameplay experience of Ghost Recon is going to be changing with this latest entry. I want to sit down and talk about some of those details. This isn't going to be me like telling you everything there is you need to know. In fact, I'd like to recommend a video if you're looking for an insanely detailed breakdown from someone who actually got to play the game. Operator Drewski's video is located down in the description below. He was actually there, able to play at the event. He doesn't have gameplay from the event, but he has a lot of information and details on everything they're adding to Breakpoint. This is more so me giving you typical Tony Mo, what do I think? What are my concerns? What am I excited for in regard to Ghost Recon Breakpoint? Now, obviously, more Ghost Recon Wildlands, essentially, is something I'm excited about. I talked a bit about this yesterday. I feel that Ghost Recon is a franchise that has always deserved a little bit more love from Ubisoft in the modern era, and it looks like it's finally getting it. On the surface, it would appear that they are playing it safe and just kind of transitioning from Wildlands 1 into Breakpoint, aka Wildlands 2. But when we look at a lot of the gameplay changes happening with Breakpoint, there's a lot of really cool stuff here. And I'd like to steer away from saying that the game is being made more realistic, because I don't think that's the case. And I think in general, the idea of realism isn't a really good term to describe any video game unless you're talking about an actual simulator, like hardcore DCFs, train simulator type stuff. In a lot of cases, a game like Ghost Recon is merely looking to expand its feature set, give player more options and more tools in their toolbox, so they can have a more immersive, more player choice driven experience. I'm hesitant to even say the word tactical, because I think that's also a very bog standard blanket statement that doesn't really say a lot. So when we talk about like features, Breakpoint is coming packed full of new features, new gameplay mechanics that simply didn't exist in Wildlands. And I'd like to say that they're doing a lot to give the player a larger opportunity to sort of set up and improve their chances of having success when they're out during an operation. So when you're back at some of the home bases that Breakpoint is going to feature, you're going to have the opportunity to like eat food and consume water and essentially give yourself small statistical buffs that are going to make you more effective out in the field. And if you're drained of those things, it's not going to cause you to die, but you're going to see a statistical disadvantage. Small things. I'm hoping that those mechanics are more flavor focused, right? It's about just kind of adding to the experience and giving you that sort of player choice. In a lot of ways, if you look at like a more hardcore, indie RPG, even like Outward, that's a game that's really big on those sorts of systems. It looks like Ghost Recon is, kind of taking some of that and saying, how can we make our gameplay experience more expansive for the player, more immersive, if you will, as much as I hate using that word, by adding in these, unique systems. We've now got like a new stamina system in the game, and while you still will be able to play on what I imagine will be several difficulty options, when you take damage in this game, it is sustained. So you don't have like a magic, oh, I just got shot in the leg, that didn't do anything, and now my health is just going to regen system. You instead have a system where it's like, okay, I just got shot in the arm. Now, until I do something about this via a bandage or like a stim or some sort of a medic system with the new classes, I'm going to be wounded here, and that's going to affect my performance, my gameplay experience by, perhaps giving me more weapon sway or forcing me to have more trouble controlling recoil. So they're trying to, add some like more high-stakes systems into the play where there weren't any before, and I think that's really wicked cool, because if there's one issue that I had with Wildlands, it was that it wasn't really difficult enough. You could crank up the difficulty and like turn off the HUD and sort of aesthetically modify the challenge, but it was really more of a, they do this much more damage and I take, a lot less damage now, so I die. Adding things like this allows you to create new moments of challenge and difficulty that don't otherwise exist. So if my team is playing in 4-player co-op, for example, and we push into a compound and, we decide this certain plan of action, like, okay, 2 of us are going to go into the back with stealth, one guy's going to be at range, and I'll cover support, and when the time comes, I'll go loud. But let's say our sniper gets taken out. He gets counter-sniped, and he's now wounded and injured, and he's, doesn't have medkits. That greatly alters the plan, because maybe he can't move as quickly, or he doesn't have as steady of a shot. I don't think it'll be anything that, like, essentially forces you to restart, like, oh, it's all screwed now, we can't do our plan anymore. But it's about adding, again, like those just more dynamic situations that can occur to the way in which the player can now be affected by the world around them outside of just, I took damage, I gotta sit here and wait for my health to regen. I think it's really cool to see the team behind Breakpoint taking, a chance on a new sort of like damage health system for the player. I feel like in general, especially when it comes to shooters, we've had non-regenerative health via, with like med packs or shield systems, or regenerative health or regenerative shields, like just a combination of these very basic two sorts of ways of dealing with the player health. And now they're coming into the play and saying, well, how do we kind of keep this, not super hardcore like Arma 3 mod level, but make it more varied and more interesting, and again, more dynamic for the player, force them into situations they might not otherwise find themselves in. I like that they're trying to bridge that gap between those two sorts of experiences by giving us something entirely new, and I'm like super, super stoked about that. Now, I also really like the idea of them bringing in a more dedicated class system. I think one of the areas in which Wildlands suffered was that it just was way too easy for everyone to be able to do just about everything, right? There weren't a lot of concerns. You didn't really need like a die-hard medic. There wasn't a role like that. And so the skill trees weren't that interesting. Everyone had the same skill tree. It wasn't that exciting. And when it came to engagements, everybody had 2 firearms plus a sidearm. Everyone could be super flexible. There was like no reason for a bespoke role, like a sharpshooter role or a guy like on the front lines when the shit hit the fans or a medic. Having those roles, I think, is just going to make co-op play more interesting, more exciting. And if you decide to play solo, where they're now replacing your group of ghosts with like some cool drone tech, you're going to have, like a different reason to kind of like spec out your class, right? And like decide what works best as a solo operative based on your playstyle. Just more player choice, more variation that I think has massive potential to improve the overall gameplay experience, both in solo and co-op. So super excited about those systems. Now, they also talked quite a bit about, kind of making the game more player discovery driven, if you will. Like the idea that you're not just going to like magically get waypoint markers anymore. You actually go out and you scout for your missions, and you can kind of then like set up your camp and prepare for that mission. I love that. I think that's the sort of feature that you typically only get in super hardcore games like Arma that can definitely function in a more like mainstream experience like Ghost Recon. It's just a matter of like somebody actually implementing it. And when I talk about a game like, Metro Exodus or, looking back at Stalker, I love those games because I love how player choice driven they feel, right? Where it's like, okay, not only do I need to personally figure out what I want to do next, I need to discover what I want to do next. And having a little bit of that in the open world of Ghost Recon could be really cool and really add to, just the experience you get. I'm going to talk a lot about co-op here because I really do feel like that's where, you're going to see huge dividends. Like playing in co-op with friends and being like, all right, well, why don't we scout west? Actually, I was thinking, why don't we scout southeast? I was like playing a little bit solo yesterday, just bum around the map, and I feel like there's some cool stuff over there we might be able to find. All right, let's go scout over southeast. Like, who knows just how far those sorts of systems will go, but they sound really cool, and they definitely, to me, sound very promising. There's just a lot of really neat things happening with Breakpoint, and I think once we move away from gameplay, there's like huge potential here for them to actually tell like a really cool and possibly even compelling story for the first time. When we look at Tom Clancy games, I think like Splinter Cell, really the only one that's ever had an extremely powerful narrative, with like a really, like a character that you're like, yes. Ghost Recon in the past did an okay job with, Mitchell and a lot of the characters that have carried throughout the franchise through years, especially through Advanced Warfighter. But this is like an opportunity for them to take Nomad, like give him a new presence, give him a new role, and then introduce John Bernthal's characters, Coldy Walker, as like a serious like counter to that, a serious threat. And I think that's really cool. I'm like kind of hopeful that the writing will actually be like worth a damn, and that they'll actually give John Bernthal some exciting things to say, and that we'll have just a little bit more narrative here. It's not at all necessary for a game like this, I think, to do well or to appeal to the audience that's likely going to play it, but is it nice to have that as an added bonus? Is it nice to suddenly like have a further connection to the Ghost and the the new squad mates we're gonna meet, and actually maybe feel a little bit more for them if something happens to them in the story? Yeah, I don't think anything serious is gonna happen. This isn't like Game of Thrones is gonna kill this character off, but like it's just cool to like have characters matter a little bit more. To have them have a little bit more of a narrative impact, so you don't just feel like you're playing this like mindless drone with a bunch of guns strapped to their back. Definitely something I'm excited for. We didn't get to see too much like vehicle driving wise, but I'm hoping driving vehicles is much better. The little bit we saw looked better than it did. And in terms of like further expanding the gameplay experience, you know, we got to see stuff like the ability to camo yourself using the terrain deformable mud, which is a really cool little mechanic. You know, again, just really expanding the toolbox that the player now has on offer, letting them cut through fences to create their own flanking routes. I think all that stuff is really, really valuable if they are also, you know, doing enough things to improve like the actual gameplay experience that happens when you start firing. Like Wildlands was just a game about shooting people, and those people didn't really shoot back in any exciting ways. They weren't really, you know, like difficult. I've heard good things about the AI so far from a lot of people who've got to play the game. And now that we have more variation among the AI with, you know, the enemy types, guys with like armor and shields akin to what we see in the Division and all of the drones, I'm hoping that that adds that extra layer of gameplay variety and challenge to those actual firefights that I think Wildlands was lacking so very much. It's looking good. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Again, if you don't really know like the full crazy feature set of whatever's happening here, I do really recommend Operator Drewski's video. He breaks all of that down really well. There's just a lot of cool stuff happening here, a lot of stuff that I didn't talk about, so it's worth checking out if you want like the full rundown. Other than that, share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.